The scorching sun beat down mercilessly on Madeline Porter's cracked lips as she stumbled over another ridge of sun-bleached rock. Her once fine traveling dress now torn and filthy, her copper hair matted with dust and sweat. 3 days. It had been 3 days since the stagecoach attack that had left her fellow passengers dead, and herself fleeing blindly into the vast Wyoming desert, a landscape as beautiful as it was unforgiving. The year was 1876, and Madeline, a 24-year-old schoolteacher from Philadelphia, had never imagined she would die like this. Alone, parched, and delirious under an endless blue sky. Her throat burned with thirst as she squinted at the horizon, wondering if the strange, shimmering figure approaching on horseback was real or just another cruel mirage conjured by her desperate mind. 50 miles away in Rock Springs, Ethan Burke lowered his whiskey glass and stared at the telegram in his weathered hand. The stagecoach bound for Rock Springs had been found ransacked, its passengers murdered all except for one Miss Porter, whose body was nowhere to be found. Ethan, known throughout Wyoming territory as the best tracker this side of the Continental Divide, folded the paper and tucked it into his vest pocket. "Sheriff's offering a reward," the bartender remarked, wiping down the counter of the Silver Dollar Saloon. "Says that schoolmarm might still be alive out there." Ethan tossed a coin onto the bar. "Not about the money, Tom." He stood, adjusting his worn leather hat over his sun-streaked brown hair. "If she's out there, she's got less than a day left without water." By nightfall, Ethan had packed his provisions and saddled his stallion, Thunder. The desert was unforgiving even to those who knew it well. For an Eastern woman with no experience of the frontier, it would be a death sentence. But something in him refused to accept that. Not another innocent life lost to this harsh land, not if he could help it. The attack site was a day's ride south of town. Ethan pushed Thunder hard through the night, guided by moonlight and instinct. He had tracked men across 5 states and 2 territories. He had hunted mountain lions that didn't want to be found. He would find this woman, dead or alive. Dawn broke as Ethan dismounted at the stagecoach site. The vehicle lay on its side, looted and abandoned. 5 shallow graves marked where the good people of a nearby settlement had buried the dead. Kneeling in the dust, Ethan studied the ground with practiced eyes. Boot prints, horse tracks, and then smaller footprints leading away from the carnage. A woman's prints, uneven and erratic, heading east into the desert. "She ran," Ethan muttered to himself, remounting Thunder. "Smart woman." The trail was faint, nearly erased by the desert wind, but Ethan followed it with the determination of a man who refused to fail. The woman had zigzagged, clearly disoriented. At points she had fallen, the impressions of her hands and knees visible in the sand, but she had gotten back up each time. She was a fighter. Miles from the stagecoach, Ethan found a torn piece of blue fabric snagged on a mesquite bush. He touched it gently. It was fine cotton, not the rough material of a frontier woman's clothing. Definitely Eastern-made. He was on the right track. The sun climbed higher as Ethan pressed on. The woman's trail showed she had begun to wander aimlessly, making circles and doubling back. The signs of dehydration and confusion were clear. He urged Thunder faster, scanning the horizon. Madeline Porter had long since given up calling for help. Her voice had abandoned her on the second day, reduced to a rasp that scared even herself. Now, on the third day, she was beyond fear or hope. The desert had become her entire world, endless, shimmering, and cruel. When she first spotted the rider, she assumed it was another hallucination. She had seen so many. Lakes that disappeared upon approach, people who melted into the air, even her own parents beckoning from behind distant rocks. But this mirage persisted, growing larger, more substantial. A man on a powerful black horse, riding directly toward her. Madeline tried to call out, but only a dry croak escaped her throat. Instead, she raised her arms weakly, waving them above her head in desperate, jerky motions before her knees finally buckled beneath her. Ethan spotted the flash of movement against the desert landscape, a figure in a tattered blue dress collapsing to the ground. He spurred Thunder forward, covering the distance in moments. Dismounting before his horse had fully stopped, he rushed to the woman's side. Her face was severely sunburned, her lips cracked and bleeding. Her breathing was shallow, her pulse weak but present. Ethan lifted her gently, cradling her like she might shatter in his arms. "Miss Porter, Miss Porter, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered, revealing bloodshot blue eyes that struggled to focus on his face. "Water," Ethan said, reaching for his canteen. "Small sips only." He tipped a few precious drops into her mouth, watching carefully as she swallowed. Then a few more. Her eyes closed again, but her breathing steadied. "You're safe now, Miss Porter," Ethan said, though he wasn't sure she could hear him. "I'm taking you back to Rock Springs." He fashioned a makeshift shade from his duster and blanket, protecting her from the relentless sun while he prepared for the journey back. Her condition was grave, severe dehydration, heat exhaustion, possibly worse. They needed to reach town quickly, but moving her too roughly could kill her just as surely as the desert. Ethan dampened a cloth and gently wiped her face, neck, and wrists, cooling her overheated skin. He spoke to her in a low, calm voice as he worked, telling her about the town that awaited her, the doctor who would care for her. Whether she could hear him or not, the sound of a human voice seemed to soothe her. When she was stable enough to move, Ethan lifted her carefully onto Thunder's back, then mounted behind her, securing her against his chest with one arm while he took the reins with the other. The journey back would be slow and careful, but they would make it. He had found her alive. He wouldn't lose her now. As they rode, Madeline drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes mumbling incoherently, sometimes silent and still. Ethan kept her supplied with small sips of water and whispered encouragement into her ear. "Stay with me, Miss Porter," he murmured as the sun began to set. "You've survived 3 days in this hell. You can make it a few more hours." Night fell, bringing merciful coolness to the desert. Stars appeared overhead, countless and brilliant, illuminating their path. Ethan knew these lands better than most men knew their own homes. He navigated by starlight, pushing forward through the darkness, the woman's life depending on his skill. Dawn was breaking when they finally reached the outskirts of Rock Springs. Ethan rode directly to Doc Miller's house, shouting before he'd even dismounted. "Doc, got an emergency here." The town physician appeared at his door in nightclothes, instantly alert at the sight of the unconscious woman in Ethan's arms. "Bring her in," Doc Miller commanded, leading the way to his examination room. "When was she last conscious?" "Few hours ago," Ethan replied, laying Madeline gently on the table. "She's been in the desert for 3 days. I've been giving her water in small amounts like you taught me." "Good man." The doctor immediately began his examination, checking her pulse, peeling back her eyelids, listening to her breathing. "She's in bad shape, but she's young and seems strong. You found her just in time, Burke." Ethan stepped back, suddenly aware of his own exhaustion. He had ridden for nearly 2 days straight, focused entirely on finding and saving Miss Porter. Now that she was in capable hands, the adrenaline drained from his system, leaving him light-headed. "Go get yourself some rest," Doc Miller said, noting Ethan's condition. "Nothing more you can do here." Ethan hesitated, his eyes fixed on Madeline's still form. "She'll make it." "I'll do everything I can," the doctor replied. "That's a promise." Reluctantly, Ethan left, but he didn't go far. He took a room at the boarding house across the street, washed the desert from his skin, and collapsed onto the bed. Despite his exhaustion, sleep came fitfully. His mind kept returning to the woman he'd pulled from the desert's grip, wondering if she would survive, what her voice would sound like when it wasn't parched with thirst, what her story was. He awoke with a start hours later, the afternoon sun slanting through his window. After dressing quickly, he crossed the street to the doctor's house. Doc Miller was at his desk when Ethan entered. "She's stable," the doctor said before Ethan could ask. "Woke up about an hour ago, confused but lucid. She asked about the man who found her." Relief flooded through Ethan. "Can I see her?" The doctor nodded. "Briefly. She needs rest more than anything." Madeline Porter lay propped up on pillows in the small recovery room behind the doctor's office. Her face was still reddened from sun exposure, but someone had washed her hair and helped her into a clean nightgown. She looked small and vulnerable in the bed, but there was a quiet dignity in the way she held herself. Her eyes, a deep blue he hadn't been able to appreciate in the desert, tracked to him as he entered the room, widening slightly in recognition. "You," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Miss Porter." Ethan removed his hat, suddenly conscious of his appearance. "How are you feeling?" "Alive," she replied with the ghost of a smile. "Thanks to you, Mr. Burke." "Ethan Burke." "Mr. Burke." She extended a hand that trembled slightly. "I am in your debt." Ethan took her hand gently, struck by how delicate it felt compared to his calloused palm. "No debt, Miss Porter, just doing what needed doing." "Madeline," she corrected him. "After what we've been through, I think formalities seem rather unnecessary." Her directness surprised him. Eastern women, in his limited experience, were usually bound by stricter social conventions. But then again, most Eastern women hadn't survived what she had. "Madeline, then," he agreed. "And I'm Ethan." She nodded, then winced slightly at the movement. "Ethan. The doctor tells me I've been unconscious for nearly a day. Your body needed the rest. You were." He hesitated, not wanting to alarm her with how close to death she had been. "You were in rough shape when I found you." "I remember very little after the second day," she admitted. "The stagecoach attack is clear in my memory. The driver and guard were killed immediately. The other passengers." Her voice faltered. "When the bandits started going through our belongings, I slipped away. I just ran. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay there." "You did the right thing," Ethan assured her. "You survived. That's what matters." Madeline's eyes filled with tears. "But the others didn't. I keep thinking perhaps I could have helped somehow." "No," Ethan said firmly. "Those men would have killed you too, or worse. You made the only choice you could." She looked away, blinking back tears. "How did you find me?" "I'm a tracker," he explained. "Best in the territory, some folks say. When word came about the attack and that you were missing, I went looking. Just like that, for a stranger." Ethan shifted uncomfortably under her direct gaze. "Couldn't just leave you out there." Before she could respond, Doc Miller appeared in the doorway. "That's enough visiting for now. Miss Porter needs her rest, and I suspect you haven't had much yourself, Burke." Ethan nodded and replaced his hat. "I'll check on you tomorrow if that's all right." "Please do," Madeline said quietly. "And Ethan, thank you for my life." As he left the doctor's office, Ethan was struck by an unfamiliar feeling. In his 32 years, he had rescued lost children, tracked down criminals, and guided countless travelers safely through dangerous territory. But something about Madeline Porter's gratitude affected him differently. Perhaps it was the quiet strength he sensed beneath her refined exterior, or the way her eyes had held his without wavering. Whatever it was, Ethan Burke found himself looking forward to tomorrow's visit in a way that both confused and intrigued him. The next morning, Ethan handled his business in town with uncharacteristic efficiency. He checked on Thunder, restocked his supplies, and spoke with the sheriff about the stagecoach attack. The bandits were still at large, likely part of the Reeves gang that had been terrorizing the territory for months. Ethan had tangled with them before and carried a scar on his left shoulder as a souvenir. By mid-afternoon, he was back at Doc Miller's, hat in hand. The doctor greeted him with raised eyebrows. "Back so soon. She's doing better today, sitting up taking broth. Remarkable recovery considering. She seems like a strong woman." "That she is. You can go on in, just keep it brief." Ethan found Madeline sitting in a chair by the window, wrapped in a quilt despite the warm day. Her hair had been brushed and braided, the copper strands catching the sunlight. When she turned to him, her smile was stronger than yesterday. "Ethan," she said, gesturing to the chair opposite hers. "Please sit with me a while." He sat, placing his hat on his knee. "You're looking better. I feel somewhat human again, though Dr. Miller says I'm still quite weak." She studied him with those clear blue eyes. "I've been thinking about what happened, about how fortunate I am that you found me. Any decent man would have looked for you, perhaps, but not every man would have found me." She leaned forward slightly. "The doctor tells me you're something of a local hero, that you've saved lives before." Ethan shrugged uncomfortably. "Doc talks too much. He says you were once a cavalryman, that you know this territory better than anyone." I do." He shifted in his seat. "But that's not important right now. What matters is getting you well enough to do whatever you came west to do." Madeline's expression sobered. "I came to teach." Rock Springs advertised for a schoolteacher in Philadelphia papers. "I sold nearly everything I owned to make the journey." Her hands tightened in her lap. "Everything I had left is gone now. My clothes, my books, my savings, all taken by those men." "The town will help you," Ethan assured her. "Folks here are good people, and they've been wanting a proper teacher for their children for some time. So I might still have a position." Hope brightened her face. "More than likely. Once you're recovered, we can speak to Mayor Williamson." Ethan hesitated, then added, "In the meantime, I'm sure the ladies of the town can help with clothing and such." Madeline straightened, pride evident in her posture. "I don't wish to be a charity case, Mr. Burke. Not charity, neighborliness." He met her gaze steadily. "Out here we look after each other, have to survive." Something in his words seemed to reach her. She relaxed slightly, nodding. "You're right, of course. I'm being prideful when I should be grateful." "Nothing wrong with pride," Ethan said. "Just don't let it get in the way of good sense." She laughed then, a surprisingly rich sound from someone still recovering. "Are you always this direct?" "Pretty much," he admitted with a small smile of his own. "Never saw much point in dancing around things." "How refreshing." Her eyes sparkled with genuine amusement. "In Philadelphia, people can have entire conversations without ever saying what they truly mean." "Sounds exhausting." "It is." She laughed again, then sobered. "I came west partly to escape that world of pretense. My parents died of influenza 2 years ago. There was nothing keeping me in Philadelphia except convention and others' expectations." Ethan nodded, understanding more than he let on. He too had fled expectations once, leaving behind a family legacy in Boston that had felt like a noose around his neck. "What about you?" Madeline asked. "Have you always lived in Wyoming territory?" "No, madam. Came west after the war. Served with the cavalry for a few years, then struck out on my own." He didn't elaborate on the nightmares that had driven him from military service, the faces of dead comrades that sometimes still haunted his dreams. "And now you're Rock Springs' resident hero," she said with a gentle smile. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Just a man who's good at finding things is all." Before Madeline could respond, a knock at the open door announced Doc Miller's return. "Miss Porter needs her rest now, Burke." You can continue your conversation tomorrow." Ethan stood, recognizing the doctor's tone as one that brooked no argument. "I'll be back, if that's all right with you, Miss Porter." "Madeline," she corrected him again. "And yes, I'd like that very much." Over the next week, Ethan's visits became a daily ritual. Each day, Madeline grew stronger. By the end of the week, Doc Miller declared she could leave his care, provided she had somewhere suitable to recuperate. "Mrs. Abernathy at the boarding house has a room prepared," Ethan informed them. "And Mayor Williamson has confirmed your teaching position will be waiting when you're fully recovered. School's not set to start for another month anyway." Madeline's face lit up with relief and gratitude. "You arranged all this. Just put in a few words with the right people," Ethan demurred. "Like I said, this town's been needing a proper teacher." "Well, I am very grateful." She stood carefully, steadier on her feet than she had been but still moving with deliberate caution. "Would you be so kind as to escort me to Mrs. Abernathy's? I'd be honored." The short walk through Rock Springs attracted considerable attention. Ethan was accustomed to nods of recognition from townsfolk, but the open curiosity directed at Madeline made him protective. He found himself walking closer to her than strictly necessary, his hand hovering near her elbow. Madeline, however, handled the scrutiny with grace. She smiled and nodded to those they passed, projecting a dignity that belied her borrowed dress and still healing complexion. "Everyone's staring," she murmured to Ethan. "Your news," he replied simply. "Not much happens in Rock Springs." "Woman survives 3 days in the desert. That's something to talk about." "I suppose I should get used to it. A schoolteacher is always under scrutiny in small towns." "They'll find something new to gossip about soon enough," Ethan assured her. "Probably me, if tradition holds." She glanced up at him, curious. "And why would they gossip about you?" Ethan realized too late the implication of his words. "No reason," he said quickly. "Just a figure of speech." Madeline's knowing smile suggested she didn't believe him, but she didn't press the issue as they arrived at Mrs. Abernathy's boarding house. The landlady, a plump, efficient widow in her 50s, welcomed Madeline warmly and showed her to a small but comfortable room on the second floor. It had been furnished with several donated items: a quilt from the church ladies, a brush and mirror set from the mayor's wife, and a modest selection of clothing contributed by various women in town. "Everyone's been so kind," Madeline said, when Mrs. Abernathy left them briefly alone. "I don't know how I'll ever repay such generosity." "By teaching their children," Ethan said simply. "That's all they want." She studied him for a moment. "And what about you, Ethan Burke? What do you want?" The question caught him off guard. "Madam, you've visited me every day. You've arranged housing, secured my position, made sure I had everything I needed." Her gaze was direct, unflinching. "Why?" Ethan shifted his weight, suddenly aware of how small the room was, how close they were standing. "Seemed like the right thing to do. Is that all?" Her voice was soft, but there was a challenge in it. Before he could formulate a response, Mrs. Abernathy bustled back into the room with fresh towels, breaking the moment. Ethan seized the opportunity to make his exit, tipping his hat to both women. "I'll check on you tomorrow, Miss Porter." As he walked away from the boarding house, Ethan's mind churned with confused thoughts. What did he want from Madeline Porter? He had told himself he was simply ensuring the welfare of someone he had rescued, as he would for anyone. But he knew, with an honesty he rarely directed at himself, that there was more to it than that. There was something about her that drew him: her courage, her dignity, the way she looked at him as if really seeing him, not just the reputation that preceded him. It had been a long time since Ethan Burke had allowed himself to care about anyone beyond the general goodwill he extended to most people. Caring meant vulnerability, and vulnerability was dangerous in a land as harsh as Wyoming. And yet, he found himself looking forward to seeing her again tomorrow, already planning what he might say, wondering what she might ask him next. The next morning, Ethan was surprised to find Madeline already downstairs at the boarding house, dressed in a simple blue dress that nearly matched her eyes, her copper hair arranged neatly. She was speaking with several townswomen who had obviously come to meet the new teacher. She spotted him in the doorway and excused herself, crossing to him with a smile that seemed to brighten the whole room. "Ethan, I was hoping you'd come by. I've been meeting some of the town's mothers." "I see that." He nodded toward the women who were watching their interaction with undisguised interest, making a good impression from the looks of it. "I hope so." She lowered her voice. "Though I think they're more interested in whether you're making an impression on me." Ethan felt heat rise in his face. "Town likes to gossip," he muttered, "so I've gathered." Her eyes danced with amusement. "Mrs. Reynolds has already informed me that you've never shown such interest in any woman passing through Rock Springs before." Ethan cleared his throat. "I don't usually have to rescue them from certain death first." Madeline laughed. "Fair point." She glanced back at the women, then at Ethan again. "Would you like to take a walk? I've been cooped up for over a week now, and the doctor says fresh air would do me good." "Are you sure you're up for it?" Ethan asked, concerned. "I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Burke," she replied with a hint of steel in her voice. "I did survive 3 days in the desert after all." "That you did," he acknowledged, offering his arm. "A walk it is." They strolled through Rock Springs, Madeline asking questions about the town, its history, and its people. Ethan found himself talking more than he usually did, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories that he hadn't thought about in years. "And that's where the school will be," he said, indicating a sturdy wooden building at the edge of town. "It's not much, but it's solid. Built it myself along with some other men last spring." "You built the schoolhouse." Madeline looked at him with new appreciation. "Helped," Ethan corrected. "I'm handy with tools, and we all knew the town needed to attract a teacher." He glanced at her. "Worked out well, I'd say." She smiled, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "May I see inside?" The schoolhouse was simple but well constructed, with rows of rough-hewn benches, a larger desk for the teacher, and a blackboard mounted on the far wall. Windows lined both sides, allowing plenty of light to filter through. Madeline walked to the teacher's desk, running her hand along its smooth surface. "How many students will I have?" 28 last count, ages 6 to 16. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, watching her. "Some of the older ones only come when farm work allows, but they're good kids." "Eager to learn." "As am I eager to teach them." She turned to face him, her expression suddenly vulnerable. "Do you think I can do this, Ethan? A Philadelphia girl teaching frontier children?" The question surprised him. "I think you can do anything you set your mind to, Madeline. You survived something that would have killed most men, let alone most women from back east. That was just stubbornness and luck. And courage," he added firmly. "These children need someone who believes in them, someone who won't give up when things get difficult." He held her gaze. "I think you're exactly what they need." Madeline's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means a great deal coming from you." They stood in silence for a moment, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Then Madeline cleared her throat and moved toward the door. "We should head back. I promised Mrs. Abernathy I wouldn't overexert myself." As they walked back toward town, Ethan found himself wondering what it would be like to see Madeline in front of a class, sharing her knowledge, encouraging young minds. The image warmed him in a way he hadn't expected. "What are you smiling about?" Madeline asked, catching his expression. Just thinking that Rock Springs got lucky, getting you for a teacher." She ducked her head, but not before he caught her pleased smile. "I think perhaps I'm the lucky one." The days passed quickly as Madeline prepared for the school term. Ethan continued to visit daily, often bringing small gifts, wildflowers from his morning ride, a book he thought she might enjoy, once even a slate and chalk so she could practice her lessons. The town watched their growing friendship with avid interest. Some, like Mrs. Abernathy, viewed it with approval. Others, particularly young, unmarried women who had set their sights on the eligible tracker, were less enthusiastic. Ethan paid no mind to the gossip. He found himself drawn to Madeline's company in a way he had never experienced before. Her quick mind challenged him. Her gentle humor made him laugh more than he had in years. And her strength, the quiet courage with which she faced her new life, impressed him daily. For her part, Madeline seemed equally content in his company. She asked endless questions about the territory, the people, the wildlife. She listened to his stories with genuine interest, drawing out details he hadn't shared with anyone before. One evening, as they sat on the boarding house porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Madeline turned to him with unexpected seriousness. "Ethan, there's something I've been wanting to ask you." He tensed slightly. "What's that?" "Why did you really come looking for me? The truth, please." Ethan stared out at the horizon, gathering his thoughts. "When I heard about the attack, about you being missing, I couldn't stand the thought of you out there alone." He looked at her directly. "I've seen what the desert does to people. Couldn't bear the idea of it happening to you. But you didn't even know me then." "No," he admitted, "but I knew you were someone who deserved a chance, and I was in a position to give you that chance." He hesitated, then added quietly, "I'm glad I did." Madeline's hand found his on the porch railing, her touch light but deliberate. "So am I." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared and stars began to emerge. Neither mentioned the fact that their hands remained linked, or the way Madeline had shifted closer so that their shoulders nearly touched. It was Madeline who finally broke the spell, reluctantly withdrawing her hand. "I should go in. School starts tomorrow." Ethan nodded, standing to help her up. "You'll do fine." "Will you come?" she asked, a hint of vulnerability in her question. To see the children's first day, wouldn't miss it for anything, he promised. The next morning, Ethan stood at the back of the schoolhouse, watching as Madeline greeted each child by name, having memorized the town registry Mrs. Abernathy had provided. She showed no sign of the nervousness she had confessed to him the night before, only warmth and genuine interest in each student. When all were seated, she stood before them with perfect poise. "Good morning, children. I am Miss Porter, and I am honored to be your teacher. We have much to learn from each other." As she began her first lesson, Ethan slipped out, not wanting to distract from her authority. But he carried with him the image of Madeline in her element, confident, compassionate, and completely captivating. Over the following weeks, Ethan and Madeline fell into a comfortable routine. He would escort her to school in the mornings when his tracking duties allowed, and often walk her home in the afternoons. On weekends, they explored the area around Rock Springs, Ethan teaching her about the land, its dangers and its beauty. Madeline thrived as a teacher. The children adored her, and even the most skeptical parents were won over by her dedication and skill. She organized a town library, convinced Mayor Williamson to fund new books, and even started evening classes for adults who wanted to improve their reading and writing. Ethan found himself increasingly drawn into town life through his association with Madeline. He attended school pageants, helped build bookshelves for the library, and even reluctantly agreed to speak to the older students about tracking and survival skills. "You're becoming quite the town fixture," Madeline teased him one Sunday as they rode back from a picnic by the creek. She had progressed from being afraid of horses to riding confidently on a gentle mare Ethan had procured for her. "Not by choice," he grumbled good-naturedly. "You're making me respectable, Miss Porter." "Heaven forbid," she laughed, the sound carrying on the warm autumn air. "Next thing you know, you'll be wearing a tie to Sunday services. Now you're just being cruel." Their laughter mingled as they rode side by side, comfortable in each other's company in a way neither had experienced with anyone else. It was a perfect moment, one that shattered when they crested the hill overlooking Rock Springs and saw riders approaching the town from the south. Ethan's hand went instinctively to the rifle in his saddle holster. "Something's wrong." 5 riders, moving fast and purposeful. Even from a distance, Ethan recognized the lead rider's distinctive hat and posture. "The Reeves gang," he said grimly. "The men who attacked your stagecoach." Madeline went pale. "Are you certain?" "Yes." He turned to her, his expression grave. "Ride to the Morton Ranch. It's just over that ridge to the east. Tell them to send men to town. I'm going to warn the sheriff." "What about you?" Fear edged her voice. "I'll be fine." He touched her hand briefly. "Go, Madeline, quickly." She hesitated only a moment before spurring her mare toward the ranch. Ethan watched her go, then urged Thunder toward town, riding hard. He reached the main street just as the gang did, cutting them off before they could reach the bank. Sheriff Taylor emerged from his office, shotgun in hand, flanked by 2 deputies. "Reeves," the sheriff called. "You're not welcome in Rock Springs." Cal Reeves, a lean, hard-faced man with cold eyes, smiled without humor. "Now, that's not very neighborly, Sheriff. We're just passing through. Thought we might do some banking business." "Bank's closed," Ethan said, his voice carrying down the street. People were ducking into buildings, doors slamming shut as the confrontation unfolded. Reeves's eyes narrowed when he spotted Ethan. "Burke, heard you found something that belonged to us a while back. A woman who wandered off during a business transaction." Anger flared in Ethan's chest. "That business transaction was murder, Reeves, and Miss Porter never belonged to you or anyone else." "She saw our faces," one of the other riders growled. "Can't have witnesses running around." "She's not your concern anymore," Ethan said, his hand hovering near his revolver. "None of you are leaving this town except in chains or coffins. Your choice." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Reeves made his decision, reaching for his gun. Ethan drew faster, firing twice. The first shot hit Reeves in the shoulder, spinning him from his horse. The second struck the man beside him in the chest. Gunfire erupted from all sides. Ethan dove for cover behind a water trough as bullets splintered the wood around him. He heard the sheriff's shotgun boom, saw one of the gang members fall. The remaining 2 turned their horses to flee, but deputies positioned at the end of the street cut off their escape. When the shooting stopped, 3 of the Reeves gang lay dead in the street. Cal Reeves himself and 1 other were wounded but alive, quickly disarmed and restrained by the sheriff and his men. Ethan stood slowly, checking himself for injuries. A bullet had grazed his left arm, but otherwise he was unharmed. He approached Reeves, who glared up at him with hatred in his eyes. "You're finished, Reeves," Ethan said quietly. "The stagecoach passengers, all those others, you'll hang for what you've done." "If I do," Reeves spat, "I'll see you in hell, Burke." "Maybe someday," Ethan agreed, turning away, "but not today." By the time Madeline returned with the Morton Ranch hands, the situation was under control. She dismounted in a flurry of skirts, rushing to Ethan's side where Doc Miller was bandaging his arm. "You're hurt." Her face was pale with fear. "Just a scratch," he assured her, wincing slightly as the doctor tightened the bandage. Reeves and his men won't bother anyone anymore. Madeline's eyes went to the bodies being carried toward the undertakers, then to the sheriff leading the wounded outlaws to jail. They came for me, didn't they, because I was a witness? Partly, Ethan admitted, but mostly for the bank. They've hit 3 others in the territory. This is my fault, no, Ethan interrupted firmly. None of this is on you. These men made their choices long before you crossed their path. Doc Miller finished his work and stepped back. Keep it clean, Burke. Change the bandage tomorrow, and maybe consider a less exciting line of work. When the doctor left them alone, Madeline touched Ethan's uninjured arm gently. I was so afraid for you. The simple admission, coupled with the emotion in her eyes, broke something open in Ethan's heart. I couldn't let them hurt you, he said softly. Not now, not ever. Madeline stepped closer, heedless of the townsfolk watching. Why? Ethan took a deep breath. Because somewhere between finding you in that desert and watching you teach those children, I fell in love with you, Madeline Porter. Her eyes widened, then filled with tears. Oh, Ethan. For one terrible moment, he thought he'd misread everything, that she didn't feel the same, that he'd ruined the friendship they'd built. Then she stood on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his in a kiss that answered his declaration more eloquently than words ever could. When they parted, Ethan was aware of cheers and whistles from onlookers. Mrs. Abernathy was beaming. Mayor Williamson was nodding approvingly. Even Sheriff Taylor managed a rare smile as he passed. Well, Ethan said, slightly embarrassed by the attention, that's one way to confirm the town gossip. Madeline laughed, her eyes shining. Let them talk. I love you too, Ethan Burke. I think I have since you found me in the desert. You gave me back my life. Then you gave me a home, a purpose. You did all that yourself, he corrected her. I just pointed the way. She shook her head. You did more than that. You showed me what it means to be truly brave, not just surviving but living with an open heart. Ethan had never been good with words, especially when it came to feelings. Instead of trying to explain what she meant to him, he simply drew her close again, kissing her with all the emotion he couldn't express verbally. The aftermath of the Reeves gang shootout brought unexpected changes to Rock Springs. The captured outlaws provided information that led to the arrest of several accomplices. Stolen money and valuables were recovered, including some of Madeline's possessions from the stagecoach robbery. Ethan found himself reluctantly cast as a town hero, a role he attempted to deflect at every opportunity. Just did what needed doing, became his standard response to thanks and congratulations. Madeline, meanwhile, continued to flourish as the town's teacher. With the recovered money from her savings, she was able to purchase new supplies for the school and additional books for the library. Her evening classes for adults grew in popularity, with even some of the most hardened cowboys showing up to improve their reading skills. As winter approached, Ethan and Madeline's courtship progressed with a speed that scandalized some of the more conservative townspeople, but seemed perfectly natural to the couple themselves. They had already faced death together. Conventional courtship rituals seemed unnecessary in comparison. On a crisp November evening, Ethan took Madeline riding to a bluff overlooking the valley where he had found her months before. The setting sun painted the landscape in golds and reds, transforming the harsh desert into something magical. Hard to believe I almost died out there, Madeline said softly, gazing across the expanse. It looks so beautiful now. That's Wyoming for you, Ethan replied, helping her down from her horse. Beautiful and deadly all at once. He spread a blanket on a flat rock and they sat side by side, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. Ethan seemed unusually nervous, fidgeting with something in his pocket. Ethan, is something wrong? He took a deep breath. Nothing's wrong. Everything's right for the first time in my life. He turned to face her fully. "Which is why I brought you out here today." From his pocket, he withdrew a small ring, a simple gold band with a single modest diamond. It had belonged to his grandmother, sent from his family in Boston when they heard of his intentions toward Madeline. "I'm not one for fancy speeches," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "But I love you, Madeline Porter. I want to build a life with you. Will you marry me?" Tears spilled down Madeline's cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, with all my heart." The ring slid onto her finger as if it had been made for her. Ethan kissed her as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the mountains, marking the end of one chapter of their lives and the beginning of another. Their wedding took place on Christmas Eve, in the schoolhouse decorated with pine boughs and candles by Madeline's students. The entire town attended, crowding into the small building to witness the union of their schoolteacher and the tracker who had brought her back from the desert. Madeline wore a dress of cream-colored satin, ordered from Denver with money the town had collected as a wedding gift. Ethan, uncomfortable but dignified in a new suit, waited for her at the front of the room, his eyes never leaving her as she walked toward him on Sheriff Taylor's arm. Their vows were simple and heartfelt. When they were pronounced husband and wife, the cheer that went up nearly raised the schoolhouse roof. The celebration continued well into the night, with dancing, feasting, and more than a few happy tears. When the newly-wed couple finally slipped away to Ethan's cabin on the edge of town, recently expanded, and improved with help from townsfolk, they were showered with well wishes and knowing smiles. "Are you happy, Mrs. Burke?" Ethan asked as he carried her across the threshold of their home. Madeline's arms tightened around his neck. "Happier than I ever thought possible." Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Madeline traced the scar on Ethan's shoulder, the one left by his previous encounter with the Reeves gang. "It's strange to think how close we came to never meeting," she murmured. "If those men hadn't attacked my stagecoach, if I hadn't been in town when word came, if I hadn't survived those 3 days." Ethan pulled her closer. "I don't believe in coincidence, Madeline. I think I was meant to find you, like I'd been searching for you my whole life without knowing it." She kissed him softly. "And I was meant to be found by you." Spring brought new beginnings to Rock Springs. The school flourished under Madeline's guidance, with students making remarkable progress. Ethan continued his work as a tracker, but now he always made sure to return home to Madeline at day's end, no matter how far he had to ride. They built a life together that balanced Ethan's need for freedom with Madeline's dedication to her students. She understood his restless nature, never complained when duty called him away, and welcomed him home with open arms. He supported her ambitions for the school, built her bookshelves and teaching aids, and sat proudly at every student exhibition. In late April, as wildflowers began to carpet the valley where Ethan had found Madeline, she shared news that filled him with equal parts joy and terror. They were going to have a child. "A baby," he repeated, stunned when she told him. "Are you sure?" "Quite sure," she laughed, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "Doc Miller confirmed it yesterday." A slow smile spread across Ethan's face. "A baby," he said again, with wonder this time. "Our baby." The news spread quickly through Rock Springs. Mrs. Abernathy immediately began knitting tiny garments. The town's men offered to build an addition to the Burke cabin. Even Sheriff Taylor, not known for sentimentality, brought over a hand-carved wooden cradle that had been in his family for generations. As Madeline's body changed with the growing child, Ethan found himself more protective than ever. He limited his tracking work to stay closer to home, much to Madeline's amusement. "I'm pregnant, Ethan, not made of glass," she teased one evening as he insisted on carrying her laundry basket. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "Not my woman," he replied, unrepentant. "Not my baby." Summer passed in a haze of anticipation and preparation. Madeline continued teaching until the school term ended, then focused on readying their home for the baby's arrival. Ethan finished the addition to their cabin, creating a nursery filled with furniture crafted by his own hands. On a warm September night, as a harvest moon hung large in the sky, Madeline went into labor. Ethan rode for Doc Miller, then paced outside their bedroom as the doctor and Mrs. Abernathy attended to his wife. The hours stretched endlessly. Ethan wore a path in the floor, flinching at each cry of pain from behind the closed door. When Madeline's cries reached a crescendo, he nearly broke down the door, only to be stopped by Sheriff Taylor, who had come to offer support. "Easy, son," the older man said, restraining him. "Women are stronger than we'll ever be. She's fighting a battle we can't help with. Have faith in her." Finally, as dawn broke over the eastern mountains, a new cry pierced the air, the wail of a newborn taking its first breath. Moments later, Doc Miller opened the door, his tired face wreathed in a smile. "Congratulations, Burke. You have a son." Ethan entered the bedroom on unsteady legs. Madeline lay propped against pillows, exhausted but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. She looked up as he approached, her smile brighter than the rising sun. "Come meet your son," she whispered. Ethan sat carefully beside her, gazing in wonder at the tiny red face peeking from the blankets. The baby had a thatch of dark hair, and when he opened them briefly, eyes as blue as his mother's. "He's perfect," Ethan murmured, gently touching his son's cheek. "Just like his mother." "I thought we might name him Samuel, after your father," Madeline suggested. "Samuel James Burke." Tears filled Ethan's eyes at the gesture. His relationship with his father had been complicated, but the man had taught him the tracking skills that ultimately led him to Madeline. It seemed fitting to honor that connection. "Samuel," he agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "It's perfect." As the sun rose fully over Rock Springs, casting golden light through the bedroom window, Ethan Burke held his wife and son in a gentle embrace, marveling at how much his life had changed in just over a year. From the moment he had followed Madeline's desperate tracks into the desert, every choice, every step had led to this, a family of his own, a love deeper than he had ever imagined possible, and a future bright with promise. Outside, the Wyoming landscape stretched vast and beautiful, the same desert that had nearly claimed Madeline's life now a backdrop to their happiness. It was a reminder of the fragility and resilience of life, of how close they had come to never finding each other, and of the extraordinary journey that had brought them together. "I love you," Ethan whispered to Madeline as little Samuel drifted to sleep in her arms. "Both of you more than I could ever say." Madeline's eyes met his, full of understanding and equal devotion. "I know," she replied softly, "and we love you too, always." In that perfect moment, as a new day dawned over the frontier town of Rock Springs, Ethan and Madeline Burke began the next chapter of their remarkable story, not as rescuer and rescued, but as partners, lovers, and parents, facing whatever adventures lay ahead together. The years passed, bringing both challenges and joys to the Burke family. Young Samuel grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's quiet strength and his mother's quick intelligence. 2 years after his birth, he was joined by a sister, Elizabeth, whose copper hair and determined spirit marked her unmistakably as Madeline's daughter. Ethan's reputation as a tracker led to offers of work throughout the territory, but he chose to limit his ranging to areas that would allow him to return home to his family within a few days. Eventually, he accepted a position as deputy sheriff, using his tracking skills to maintain order in and around Rock Springs. Madeline continued teaching until the arrival of their third child, William, after which she focused on creating a home school for their children and others in the outlying areas. Her pioneering educational methods drew attention from as far away as Denver, and she occasionally published articles in teaching journals back east. Rock Springs grew and prospered, transforming from a frontier outpost to a proper town with a church, a real schoolhouse, and eventually even a small hospital where Doc Miller trained a successor. Through it all, the story of how Ethan Burke had tracked and rescued Madeline Porter from certain death in the desert remained a favorite local legend, embellished with each retelling until the actual events were almost lost beneath layers of romantic exaggeration. On the 10th anniversary of their meeting, Ethan took Madeline back to the spot where he had found her. They rode out alone, leaving the children with Mrs. Abernathy, now a beloved grandmother figure to all the Burke offspring. The desert had changed little in a decade. The same harsh beauty stretched in all directions. The same unforgiving sun beat down upon the rocks and sand. But Ethan and Madeline had changed immeasurably. They dismounted at the exact location where their lives had intersected that fateful day. Ethan spread a blanket and they sat together, hands intertwined, contemplating the journey they had taken. "Do you ever think about how unlikely it all was?" Madeline asked, leaning against his shoulder. "That I would survive long enough for you to find me?" Ethan nodded, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "I think about it more than you know, how close I came to losing you before I ever knew you. I was delirious when you found me," she recalled. "I thought you were another mirage, but then you gave me water and your voice. It anchored me somehow, brought me back." "You saved yourself, Madeline," he said, the admission he'd always believed but rarely voiced. "You kept going when most would have given up. All I did was follow your trail." She turned to him, cupping his face in her hands. At 34, Madeline Burke was more beautiful to Ethan than she had been at 24, her face now lined with laughter, her eyes deeper with experience and wisdom. "We saved each other," she corrected gently. "You were as lost as I was, just in a different way." He couldn't deny it. Before Madeline, he had drifted through life, disconnected from others, haunted by war memories, defined by his skills rather than his heart. She had taught him that vulnerability wasn't weakness, that loving deeply was the greatest courage of all. "Best tracking I ever did," he murmured, drawing her close. "Finding you." They kissed beneath the vast Wyoming sky, the desert a silent witness to their enduring love. Then they mounted their horses and rode back toward Rock Springs, back to their children, their home, and the life they had built together from the most desperate of beginnings. As the sun set behind them, Madeline glanced over at her husband, still straight-backed and handsome at 42, his face weathered by years of outdoor life, his eyes still alert and perceptive as they had been the day he spotted her collapsing form in the distance. "I'm still following your trail, Madeline Burke," he said, catching her gaze. "And I always will." She smiled, her heart as full as it had been the day he'd found her dying in the desert and brought her back to life. "And I'm still following yours, Ethan Burke, into whatever adventure comes next." Side by side, they rode toward home, their shadows stretching long before them, intertwined and inseparable just as they had been since that first desperate day, and just as they would remain through all the days to come.